he only played with a non-amplified guitar, and when he did come out with that guitar or the amplified album, everybody thought that he had just abandoned the world.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, thank you.
Bob Dylan. As a matter of fact, there was a special on Bob on Georgia Public Television last month, which I did record. And yeah, Pete Seeger, the father of folk guitar, when Bob came out there at the Montrose Jazz Festival, one of those, he came out there with his band, the band.
The band, yeah.
And he started playing like a Rolling Stone on electric. And so you could say he was the first one to start it here. I think the Beatles got there before him.
Yeah, that was like in 67?
67, 68, yeah. And Pete Seeger was so angry about it that he went back there looking for the plug. What it was, he had brought his father. Pete Seeger had brought his father
to see Bob.
And his father was like, very old. He couldn't hardly hear anyway. That's how the story goes. And so Pete was just infuriated. And Bob Dylan didn't find this out until like 40 years later, well, 38 years, whatever, that Pete Seeger was actually back there looking for the plug.
He was going to unplug him. Huh?
Yeah. And, he came out. He came out and did do some solo acoustic songs after that because the crowd was like
they were, yeah.
It was in an uproar.
Exactly. But things are changing. That's what's so nice about playing instruments in general, guitars or whatever you're playing, or banjos, whatever you're playing, or any type of instrument. It's just things keep progressing and they keep getting better. But again, somebody just learning to play guitar, some 10, 12, 14-year-old boy or girl wanting to come play guitar, what type of guitar would they get to start with, and what do you recommend for that?
For a child, let's see, for a small child, my youngest student is just turned 7. His name is Mason. Hey, Mason. And Mason has a little classical guitar. We call it half scale or 3/4 scale. It's a small one made for a child. My advice to any parent that's going to buy a child a guitar, don't just go into a store and buy a guitar, because there's a lot of factors at play here. How tall is the child?
The fit, right.
How long is the child's arms? These sort of things. And most parents, they just don't know. They don't have a clue. They get them these great big guitars for Christmas, and the child just can't play them. You can't reach down here. So my advice is this. Shop around. They've got several music stores in Athens. You can also go to online marketplaces also. I don't know, can I mention
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, it's fine.
Musiciansfriend.com. Go online and check it out. Anyway, you can get now you can get electric guitars for children. You can get Fender electric guitars or Gibson electric guitars for children that are this small.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Stratocasters, Fender Stratocasters that are only this long. The main thing is for a child, if he or she is like this tall, think small. Okay, think very small.
Yeah.
And of course, as the child gets older, you get them a larger instrument later. But it really, I've struggled when I was first starting because who knew? I mean, who knew? I just got a little Sears Silvertone guitar for $19. The string sat up 4 inches.
That was going to be my next comment. That was going to be my next little observation there. Go ahead.
Yeah, the strings were this high, and we just didn't know. I mean, the Beatles had just come out. I saw them on Ed Sullivan play for the first time when I was 9 years old, and that was it for me. Dad, I got to have a guitar. So he went to Sears. How many times have you heard that story?
Oh, all the time.
My dad went to Sears, or my mom went to Sears and got me a guitar with the strings this high.
Now, when you're talking about the strings this high, the reason you don't want them is why?
High?
Yeah, why don't you want them high like that?
Well, it hurts your fingers.
Exactly. You play about 3 times, you go, this hurts. I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, also for a child, you also have to remember their what would you call it? Their
dexterity,
their tolerance for pain is very low.
Oh yeah.
So another word of advice here: if you're going to get a guitar for a child, do not get steel strings, because they hurt. They really do. Well, a child anyway. You want to get them a nylon string. Nylon. Now, how can you tell the difference? Well, it's very easy. Steel is shiny, and nylon is dull. The first 3 strings here are like fishing line. 30, 40-pound test fishing line.
Mm-hmm. That's really it.
And the top 3 bass strings, or the bottom 3, the bass strings, are wound nylon. That's all it is. It's nylon like this, but it's wound.
Just gives you a deeper sound.
Just gives it a deeper sound. The thicker the string, the bassier the sound.
Exactly.
So yeah, get them a nylon string guitar, and then of course you want them to practice.
You want to practice. Something else that I really suggest you do is you bring that guitar before you buy it. See if that store will let you say, let me take it down to my music teacher. Bring it down to Craig. Let him look at it. See if it can even be set up correctly. And setting it up correctly is, can you get those strings down where you're not going to cut a finger every time you push one in?
Right.
Can it be brought down to where you can actually play the guitar?
Right. What a setup is, well, you're right. I mean, you're adjusting, say, for example, on Epi here, we have what we call an adjustable bridge. It's called a tune-o-matic. You have a screw here and a screw here. And you basically just take a flat-headed screwdriver and lower or raise the bridge depending on the kind of action that you want. Now, action is height of the strings. That's what it's called. Some people like myself, I like a low action. But on Epi, I like a slightly higher action because I like more of a bite, so to speak. And on classical guitars, the action is set. There's really nothing you can do except maybe lower it by carving the grooves in the nut lower with a file, and that'll get your action a little lower. Or down here, you can adjust the action by sanding the bridge saddle. So anyway, also setting up, you have, if we look at this guitar, we have a little plastic cover here. Now what that does, you take out the screws and you have what's called a truss rod. Now, the truss rod is a rod that runs down the center of the inside of the fingerboard and the entire neck. And it usually is adjusted with an Allen wrench. Now, what's a truss rod doing? What's it even there for? Well, okay. Say like you move from Alaska where it's cold, and then all of a sudden you're down here. Today it's like, what, 70 degrees? Well, what happens is this. Temperature changes, humidity, hot, cold, all these things are factors when it comes to an instrument, any instrument. And so with a guitar, the fingerboard will get bowed, or rather the entire neck will get bowed, just like the letter U. And so what this truss rod is put there for is you adjust this rod and it straightens the neck back out. It's very common. No, it's not a big deal. That's why they're there. It's just temperature. Every time I set up this guitar, I always check the neck to see if it's straight. I check the action. I check the intonation. That means seeing if it's going to stay in tune. And so a truss rod adjustment is very routine, very routine.
Yeah, so just if you see a guitar that's been in your closet for 20 years, and it's an old Gibson or something, you look at it and it has this big bow in it, don't throw it away. Bring it down to Craig, let him have a look at it, because it might be that if you've watched the road show on TV, I saw one the other day, it was an old Gibson, I think it was an L4 or L400, the big one, the great big one.
Oh,
I think it was the L400.
L4, I think.
One or the other. And it was worth like $25,000.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. I tell you what now, these guitars, Jimmy Page, have you ever heard of Jimmy Page?
Sure, oh, absolutely. I remember real well.
The guitar player for Led Zeppelin. I just was in Savannah last week, and I went to a place called Annie's Guitars and Drums. Now, Annie's last name is Allman.
As in the Allman Brothers.
Greg Allman is her cousin, and Greg Allman lives in Savannah now. Well, actually in Richmond Hill. But anyway, Annie opened up this store, and she deals in these rare, hard to find, and very expensive instruments. And what she found was a Les Paul. A Les Paul looks identical to this. This is a Les Paul Epiphone. She has a Les Paul Gibson that was called the Jimmy Page edition. Now, they only made so many thousands of these Les Paul guitars.
Right.
And he autographed only so many. But the rest of the other 5,000 or so they made were to Jimmy Page's exact specifications, right down to the electronic wiring, to get that special Led Zeppelin sound. And, it had the letter of authenticity in the neck. You could read all about this guitar. I said, Annie, How much is that? And this was a